Good morning. I wanted to continue my talk on the topic of the voice for God and frame this around my 25-year devotion to A Course in Miracles, where the voice for God is one of the names given to the Holy Spirit. When I was talking last about my early experiences in recovery, when I was in my halfway house from December 1985 to June 1986, I was in Springfield, Massachusetts. And when I was getting near the end of my 6-month stay, my counselor asked me what my plan was for after leaving Opportunity House. And I said, Maurice, I actually don't have a plan, but there is this whole health expo coming to Springfield very soon. And I think I'm going to get some information there that'll help me decide how to start my new life. So he was willing to trust me. I'd been one of the very few loyal clients, maybe the only one that I knew that would stay the full 6 months and take full advantage of the opportunity of Opportunity House. Anyway, so at this whole health expo, it was a Saturday and Sunday. And the first day I saw many healthy, spiritual, presentations, speakers, people had booths with information. Anyway, it seemed that there was a lot of activity going on in the Amherst, Northampton area of Massachusetts. So I kind of thought at the end of Saturday, I'm pretty sure I'm supposed to head that way, Amherst, Massachusetts. But it was the second day, in the morning on Sunday, that I heard this woman, her name was Claire Ludlow, give a talk on this thing that at the time, I didn't think I'd ever heard of before, called A Course in Miracles. And I'm sure just 10 minutes into her talk, I knew that my plan was to move to Amherst, Massachusetts to study A Course in Miracles with Claire Ludlow at her place at the time called Harmony Institute. So that was the plan. When I talked with her, I went up and introduced myself after her talk and told her how enthusiastic I was about moving to Amherst and studying with her. And this was, like I said, like in June. And she said, well, the next series of classes, we do like a year-long study of the workbook and begin the next series in September. I'm like, so I have to wait until September. She said, well, it's not that far away. And what I recommend, she actually recommended a series of tapes that Beverly Hutchinson had made with Stephen Halpern doing music and piano talks on A Course in Miracles. And so she recommended that I just listen to those talks and actually wait to start reading the book until we were in class together beginning in September. So I did that. I listened to these tapes. I remember listening to them like every night before I went to bed and early again in the morning. And it was remarkable. I really loved Beverly's voice and it was really a lovely series of tapes that she had done with Stephen Halpern. And so that was my introduction to the material. And it was a very lovely introduction. It was with the music and all that, very, very uplifting. And I remember one part of the story that was interesting was, here I was starting my new life. I didn't have any possessions per se. I had purchased a bicycle while I was living at the halfway house with money that I had earned. I was working part-time as a page in a library in Springfield. They encouraged everybody to get some kind of part-time job while they were staying at the halfway house. And anyway, I'd saved my $5 or $10 a week for quite some time and bought a really nice bicycle. So I had a bicycle and some books and some clothes and a tent. And actually, when I went to Amherst, I had gotten in touch with Sirius, named from the stars, Sirius Community, which was an offshoot of the Findhorn Foundation in Scotland. They actually called Sirius Community, some people, the nickname was Findhorn 2. So I contacted them and made arrangements to move there and set up my tent and camp and work in exchange for the privilege of living there and sharing meals with them. And while I looked for another place to live in Amherst, and they were just outside of Amherst up in Shutesbury. And I remember that process was pretty interesting, where I was looking for a place to live that was reasonable or free, a place maybe where I could work in exchange for rent. And the weeks were going by, and I wasn't finding anything in the money that I had I forget now, I think I needed to pay them a little bit of money and give them some labor in exchange for camping there. I forget exactly, but it was getting down to the wire. And I remember I was going to go down on my bicycle down to Amherst on a Monday to look, hopefully this was like the last time, hopefully find a place to live, a situation. And I remember going to like the community meal that Sunday, a bunch of people, like-minded people that live in intentional community. And so I remember talking with this one fellow about my plight, that I had a difficult time. It had been raining a lot that August and a lot of mosquitoes. And it was just kind of a real trial. And I was really needing, when I went down on Monday, to find something. And I remember this fellow just asking me this question, like, why did you move to Amherst? I said, well, to study A Course in Miracles. And he goes, well, then I would say tomorrow you should expect a miracle. And it was so great. It was so perfect that's exactly what happened the next day. I remember going down, it had been so cloudy and rainy, and that morning the clouds were parting and the sun came out, and I remember just feeling the sun on my face, and I was crying a lot. I mean, that was something that I did, I think, for the first 3 years of my recovery. I think I cried at least once every day, usually in the morning when I was saying prayers, listening to Ave Maria or some inspirational music. It was really very beneficial for me to cry, just really releasing all the pain from my childhood, from the past, the accumulation of pain over 33 years. And that was a big part of, obviously, what A Course in Miracles was all about, would be to help me with my rebirth. But I was dying to the past, and I was crying a lot. Anyway, a miracle happened. I found the situation with this elderly woman where I could rent her basement and live for free, just in exchange for some work around her property. And started my new simple life. It was really a beautiful thing. Claire was an amazing teacher for me. I know I shared in an earlier talk the dream therapy that she did with me and helped me with my new relationship. I had difficulties accepting Jesus as the teacher of A Course in Miracles. She helped me through that, and she helped me in many ways. In fact, she and her husband Ben really became surrogate parents for me in this rebirthing process. The two of them both very, very sweet people. I spent a lot of time at their home having meals with them and doing yard work and doing whatever. I mean, it was like like a young teenager starting a new life. And Claire took me under her wing. Not only she saw my potential as a very devoted student, and she actually encouraged me to. She said that one of the key lessons in Course in Miracles is that teaching and learning are intertwined. Like teaching is an accelerated form of learning. Like teach what you want to learn, kind of thing. So she encouraged me to accompany her. She was doing a group in a maximum security prison in Northampton, Massachusetts. She encouraged me to come along as her assistant and co-facilitate this group with these men who were all serving life sentences for violent crime. And so she had an attitudinal healing, something that Jerry Jampolsky had started, this program for prisoners. And so there was a prison program around the country where people would go in and teach A Course in Miracles to the inmates under the name attitudinal healing. And it was really a remarkable process. I think I did it with Claire for almost 2 years, and went in and did this weekly group with a group of men that at first frightened me a lot. I remember, in fact, one of the first encounters I had in the group, seeing this fellow that just looked so scary to me. His face was he was like a Latino man. And his face was very scarred and pocked. It just looked very frightening. And his name was Jesus. And I remember Claire asking the men in the circle if they were okay talking about love. And I remember when it came around to Jesus, and all the men were uncomfortable, but they all said yes. But I remember when Jesus said yes, it was okay with him to talk about love. You could see him trembling. He could barely hold back his tears. And I remember in that moment, my heart opening so wide and realizing, wow, it doesn't matter what he or these other men have done. These are my brothers. These are beautiful human beings inside. They just are so damaged. And so that was a big step for me as far as being a student of A Course in Miracles and realizing the beauty of this teaching that was all about removing the blocks to the awareness of love's presence. That's what it says in the very beginning. It's what the Course is for, to help you remove the blocks to the awareness of love's presence in your life, and how that would redefine you as a being. And like I said in some of my other talks, for me, the teaching, I would avoid a lot of the controversial aspects of the teaching that really had a lot to do with the woman that channeled the material, Helen Schuckman, and her colleague Bill Thetford. They were the ones that literally created this book out of transmissions that would come through Helen, and they had all their own dynamic. They're intellectuals, and a lot of the teaching was really directed at their own personal issues, their relationship with each other, and all that. Because a lot of the text material seems to really be focused on the ego. The ego is evil, and you have to undo the ego. And to this day, one of the reasons why after my 25-year devotion, I was ready to move on is that in my estimation, the vast majority of people that are studying Course in Miracles, they're locked into their own egoic battle. And so they're interpreting the Course in Miracles from the perspective of their ego. And so everything's about the battle. Everything's about the battle. That's what ego is. It's just a devotion to conflict. So for me, it was very different to really take on a relationship with Jesus as a brother who would teach me what the real meaning and purpose of A Course in Miracles is, which is to invite you to become like him a Messiah, the only lesson that's repeated 5 times in the course is you are the light of the world. Like that is your function, that is your mission. And I've talked about that before. Our energetic function is to be this conduit through which the unmanifested, through which God, Holy Spirit would be the name in Course in Miracles language for the energetic principle that moves through you, that speaks through you, the voice for God. And so it's embodied. There's a beautiful benediction at the very end of the Course in Miracles where Jesus is saying directly, through you is ushered in a world unseen yet truly there. Holy are you, and blah blah blah. Your function, and that to me that is the whole meaning of the course. To receive that benediction and to become like Jesus, an emissary of love, of light. And there are a few people in the global Course in Miracles community that certainly understand that message, and they're about that. David Hoffmeister is one very good example, and I really admire him and his devotion, and he's manifesting a beautiful community around the world of people that are really devoted to the true essence of the teaching. I think another example is David or Dove. He goes by Dove Fishman, who he hosts an online teaching platform called ACIM Gather, and I used to teach there online for a number of years. But one of the things that was important for me in my devotion is being like devotion is devotion. I remember when I first heard Ken Wapnick talk, he came to Amherst. Claire was one of his first students, and so they had a very close relationship, and so she would bring Ken to Amherst to give inspirational talks from time to time. And I remember the first time that I sat in the audience listening to Ken Wapnick speak, I remember thinking to myself, like, wow, his devotion to A Course in Miracles is going to be what it inspires my devotion. And I want to devote my life to A Course in Miracles. And at the time, because I was very enraptured also with AA and the 12 steps, that became my devotion, was to sort of bring out the best of the two of these things and actually integrate. And there was a time when I had made a decision early on that I would spend the first 3 years of my recovery living in Amherst and studying with Claire. And then at 3 years sober, which would be November of 1988, I would make plans to move on. And the same thing as before when I was at Opportunity House. I didn't really have a plan. It was I think middle of November, end of November, and I still didn't really have a sense of, okay, where am I going next? And then I was talking with some AA buddies, and somebody had mentioned something like, wow, you're so devoted to your recovery and all that, you might want to consider becoming a CD counselor, chemical dependency counselor. There's a great program, relatively new, that was developed in Center City, Minnesota, a place called Hazelden, where they had a teaching center where you would go for a year training to be certified as a chemical dependency counselor, working in other facilities, prisons or wherever. That was kind of a new, pretty big field in therapy, was chemical dependency counseling. So suddenly that idea was like, well, yeah, I guess that's it. I guess that's what I'm going to do. So within a few weeks, I took a trip out to Minnesota. I made an application to the program, which was starting, I think, in February. It did a year-long thing. I think started in early February 1989. So that was that, and I wrapped up my life in Amherst and moved out with my bicycle and some books and some clothes to Center City, Minnesota. It was pretty amazing because I got there right near the end of January. Like you said, the program would start probably the second week in February. And it was the frozen tundra. I'd never been in Minnesota. I never would have ever imagined I would live in Minnesota. And here I'm living in like a converted motel that was the student housing for the counselor training program. And I remember just thinking to myself, well, here I am again, just following guidance, just taking the next best step. And it was interesting. I got involved in the program, and the woman that was in charge of the program, her name was Dorothy, and she didn't like me very much. It was pretty plain. When she found out that I actually had put up a notice at Hazelden for staff that worked at Hazelden. It's a really big complex, a big center. Anyway, I put up a notice that I was going to start a weekly group for A Course in Miracles, that was my devotion. And I remember she said to me, Dorothy said to me, she says, well, if you're like a student in the program here, maybe it's probably not a good idea that you're also teaching, something else. I don't think she understood what A Course in Miracles was. And I just said to her, Dorothy, this is my devotion. I'm devoted to the 12 steps. I'm devoted to A Course in Miracles. That's what I'm going to do. And I think she didn't like it that I didn't go, Heil Hitler, I will obey your orders and I'll stop teaching. So needless to say, at the first quarter of the program, she sat me down, did an evaluation. We had all done a MMPI, Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory. And she said to me, it was so cute, she says, you're just a square peg trying to fit into a round hole, and I just don't see it working out. So, I'm going to terminate your program. So here we are now, I think May, something like that, 3 months in. And I remember walking down the main street from the center, Hazelden, the big center, to the housing place. It was a lovely spring day. And I remember just crying, like I always do, crying like, okay, I'm getting thrown out of Hazelden. I'm in the middle of Minnesota. I've got a bicycle, some books, and some clothes. What am I supposed to do? Like, help me. You're running the show now. What am I supposed to do? So it was really fascinating that what evolved quickly, because I think they gave me like 10 days or 2 weeks to, move out. So I remember presenting my dilemma to my Course in Miracles group. And one of the members of that group was a woman who was a acquisition editor for Hazelden. They have a big publishing company. And I had shared with her my interest in writing a booklet series integrating the 12 steps in A Course in Miracles. And so this woman, she said to me, Louis, I'm going to pitch your idea. I think it's a good idea. I think they'll want to publish this. I think they'll sign a contract with you, and you'll make enough money to at least continue living, get an apartment somewhere, and live in the area. And I remember thinking like, okay. So she presented it. They accepted the idea. I think I got a little bit of a cash advance. I rented an apartment in a house in St. Croix Falls, Wisconsin, just over the border. So I think on my bicycle, it was probably about an hour bike ride from Hazelden. Anyway, so I was going to be set up enough money to pay my rent and start writing this, I think, a 12 booklet series, one of each of the 12 steps, integrating the teaching of the Course in Miracles. And I was pretty excited because I think that's something that I was really called to do. Even at the time, I was already, I think, a pretty accomplished writer. I'd been writing a lot of articles for magazines and papers and spiritually minded publications, whatever. And here I was now going to publish a book, in a booklet form, but it was, a book with Hazelden. And Hazelden, they eventually became Hazel and Harper, a big publishing company. So interesting So here it was set up. It was in July, early July, early July. It was 4th of July. 4th of July, I get a phone call from my mom, and she's crying, and she tells me that my younger sister Lynn had committed suicide. She hung herself, but they had cut her down before she was fully dead. So she was in a coma. And so the implication was she would like it if I came back to spend some time supporting her. Who knows? Who knew how long Lynn would be in a coma? And it was interesting when she was telling me this and crying, and this voice, the voice, whispers in my ear, "Pay attention." Like this whole scene is going to be more remarkable than you can imagine. And it was pretty amazing. I'll try to wrap this up. I'll probably have to do this in two sections. My life devotion with the Course in Miracles, but this was a very significant step for me in my relationship with the voice, the Holy Spirit, now you would call it, saying, "Pay attention." First thing that happens is I'm on the phone shortly after with my sister who lives in Seattle. She's a professor, and so we're talking about her flying through Minneapolis, and we fly together to go back and help my mom and my other sister. All of us would be together as a family to support Lynn in her coma. My sister says to me, "Would you please consider not coming home?" And she goes on to explain to me how she's always felt as the middle child left out. I've always been mom's favorite. I've always been the one that was there to sort of be a counselor, supporter of mom. And, if you come back also, I'll just be again invisible. I won't have any sense of purpose. So I said to her, because the voice had said, "Pay attention. My sister's asking me not to come home. Stay in Wisconsin while we sit in vigil with Lynn." So I'm like, okay. So I agree to do that. Later explained to my mom, "Jody's asking, whatever, I can be of support here. We can talk on the phone and blah, blah, blah." So here I am in Center City, or not Center City, in St. Croix Falls, Wisconsin, with my bicycle. And I remember I would ride my bicycle every day, and I would cry and I would cry and I would cry. Now thinking about my sister Lynn, we had always been best friends, and here she is in so much anguish in her angry coma with her hands clenched, angry look on her face. I mean, it was getting the description from my mom. And every day I just would sort of like be riding my bicycle and praying, like, how can I help? How can I help? How can I help? And then about 5 days into this process, I think, voice very clearly wakes me up in the middle of the night saying, "Write her a letter." Okay. So I sit down at my typewriter and I write a letter to my little sister, just basically taking dictation because the voice was telling me, just give her the blessing. She needs the blessing. She needs to know that it's okay to be free. All right. And I remember saying, you could decide to come back and heal and have a happy life, or you can be free. You don't need to carry the burden for the family any longer. It's kind of like we had this really shitty family, and being the youngest, the fourth, everything kind of, all the worst stuff ended up on her. So she had had a horrible life. She'd been involved herself. I mean, she'd taken me to my halfway house, or no, she took me to my, when I went into treatment. And 10 days later, she signed herself into the treatment center. She was in and out of treatment centers all the time. So again, I remember for me, this whole idea of pay attention. Lynn's process is for you also. Okay. It's a deep incentive for me to get it, to heal, to change, to grow. Like, we have a choice: get out or make things better. She's going to get out. So anyway, I wrote the letter saying, "You're free. I love you so much. Just be free, be happy." And it was a beautiful thing. I think 2 days later, after the letter arrived, my eldest sister, she wanted to have her role. So she wanted to read the letter aloud to Lynn. They read the letter to Lynn, my letter, and her hands open and they see this like stigmata from her fingernails. It was just this amazing thing, like stigmata in her palms. And she stopped, relaxed her face, made a little smile. They pulled the life support and she was gone. It was an amazing thing later when my mom's telling me how beautiful it was. It was just like this really precious moment. And for me, I immediately said to my mom, I need to give Lynn's eulogy at her memorial service. And my mom said, of course. And that would cause a rift. I've never had a good relationship with either of my sisters since that time. I think that was kind of like the icing on the cake, that I could stand up and have this moment that was amazing. And I'm going to save that for the next segment, because it's its own great story, I think. But this was the turning point for me. Here I am, just a little bit over 3 years sober, and my sister commits suicide, and it's like, okay, now more than ever, I am so motivated to make my life really our life, doing this for my sister Lynn as well. And I'll remember, because there's a great story, not only in memorial service, but the Easter Sunday the year following. I'm going to save that for the next section. Okay, well, thank you for listening again. This is great for me to be able to share, because these stories are not stories that I've had a chance to really bring together in this integrated fashion and share with my world. So thank you for being there to receive it. I love you.